My name is Eric Mesner. I'm assuming everybody knows. I'll use my teacher voice too. So we're lucky to have Matt Winstead speak with us today. If you don't know Matt, my favorite thing about Matt, if you've heard the line, you can have 20 years of experience, or you can have 1 year of experience 20 times. I feel like Matt has found a way to cram like 50 years of experience in just like 15 years. And so we're very lucky to have him. He's got tons of wisdom, and hopefully with the video, I didn't ask if it was okay if you were on a video, but we'll put it on Facebook, and hopefully everybody will get to enjoy the wisdom that we're going to hear today. So he's here to speak with us today on equipment, taking care of it, and selecting it, and so forth. So I'll hand the mic over to Matt.
How's it going? So I'm going to be up and down out of the chair. I blew my back out, and so kind of nerve pain, so I'm going to be kind of moving around quite a bit. Plus I got ADD, so just kind of bear with me. But anyways, guys, I'm Matt Winstead, and I know some of you guys probably know me, some of you don't. But we're going to be talking about equipment today, and I've got a lot. This is one of those topics where they kind of asked me to talk about it, and I'm not exactly sure what you guys want out of this. So it's one of those things I did leave quite a bit for Q&A. And so if you guys have any questions at the end, just let me know. I'll have plenty of time for Q&A so I can talk to you guys about whatever you guys want at the very end. So here's a little bit about me. So I own a Golden Rule Farm and Midwest Bee Removal. And so we have a company that basically is kind of like a pest control company. We'll kill wasps and stuff like that, but also save bees out of people's homes. We're licensed, insured, we've been doing it for years. We can take around the house without destroying it. We have thermal imaging, all that stuff. I've been keeping bees for 10 years. I started just like a lot of other people did, bought a hive in my backyard with packaged bees, killed them every year for 3 years like everybody else also. So right now we own roughly 600 hives, and that number kind of goes up and down just depending on everything. We typically will start the spring with a lot more splits than that, sell quite a few. Of course, when you make splits, they don't all take, but we run roughly 600 production hives. We run bees in Missouri, Texas, California, and we sent some to Nebraska this year for the first time ever. It's one of those things where my operation is growing faster than I can either work or find good help for. So I had somebody going to rent our bees, so we rented them about 100 hives for honey in Nebraska. We do pollination in California. We don't make any honey out there. We basically send them out there to pollinate the almonds. Last year we pollinated organic blueberries. So we send the stuff out there for that. Texas, we use Texas for making splits. We can install queen cells as early as the 10th of March in Texas. You can't really make splits very easily 10th of March in Missouri. So that's why we do that. Basically just kind of get early start on season so we can make a split down there, starting around early March. And then by the time our honey flow hits, which is our main honey flow starts the second week of June, we've got a big old huge production colony that's going to put on just like it was never even split to begin with. So that's what we do in Texas, and then we make 100% of our honey here in Missouri. So we typically run in Jackson County, Lafayette County. We have a few yards in Johnson County, and every once in a while, like I have gone to like Henry County around Clinton to make like smart wheat honey and whatnot. But all our honey is made around here. We produce honey. We're probably one of the state's largest nuke sellers. We sell nukes in Texas, Missouri, Kansas. I think that's about it. Yeah. Anyway, and then of course my girlfriend edited out of this, and she said that I'm 6'3", makes the best dad jokes, and loves long walks and beaches. She thought that was needed for you guys, so just in case you wanted to know. So, yeah. All right. So what are your goals and abilities? So this chart right here is pretty much for everything in this world, whether it's remodeling your kitchen, whether it's building your beehives, or whether it's the treatment on what you use to make it last. You can have good and fast, but you can't have cheap. You can have good and cheap, but you can't have fast, and so forth and so on. You only get two of one, right? And so just keep that in mind as you think about your equipment. So basically, your types of wood that you got, one of the most common is pine. I mean, most of you guys, if you guys have beekeeping equipment, most of it's probably pine. It's easy to find, it's fairly cheap, it's lightweight. You're able to work with it good. When I say that, cut, screw, nail, etc., go get some 10-year-old oak or hedge and then try to make beehives out of it, and you'll know exactly what I mean. The cons of pine is it rots very quickly. It's real soft wood, so it's easy to, if you run over with a bobcat, it's not going to last. Southern yellow pine is heavier and harder to work with, so I kind of did that with the caveat. I don't like southern yellow pine. If you get your equipment from like Georgia or Florida, more than likely it's going to be made out of southern yellow pine, which has a higher sap content, and it's also not a, I really don't know the word for it, but straight green. It has a lot more knots and stuff like that. It's a little bit harder to work with. It's heavier. I'm not a big southern yellow pine fan. Build or buy? That is the question. Okay. So, question to ask yourself when it comes to your beekeeping equipment. What do I have more of? Time or money? Okay? Because I know I did construction for 10 years, and I know that working construction, you either have time or money, you never have both. You're working 12 hours, 7 days a week in the summertime, or you're laid off in the wintertime, so you either have time or have money, but usually you don't have both. Once again, that chart. How long do I want this beekeeping equipment to last? Okay? If you're making it out of OSB, it's not going to last. I don't care how many coats of paint you put on it, it is not going to last. So that's something to ask yourself when you're building your equipment. Do I want equipment that I can sell if needed? It's one of those things like when you start building equipment, is it going to be unique? Is it going to be something that is, you thought you would like this about it or that about it or whatever, but necessarily is not going to be able to sell? Which if you got one or two hives, it's not a big deal, but you start making enough for like 20 hives, 50 hives, 100 hives, a few hundred hives, you don't want something that only works for you and your operation just in case you want an exit strategy one day. Do I plan on palletizing my operation in the future? So if you're making your own boxes and you're doing something funky where you're making them extra tall so you don't need to build a bottom board or something like that, that's something you're not going to be able to throw on a pallet, And if you plan on having more than, so many hives, you're going to want to buy a bobcat one day so you're not like me on your second back operation. So that's something that you might want to think about. When we go pull honey, we pull a pallet into the yard and we put everything on a pallet, we load it up on the truck so we never lift a box of honey above our waist. Okay? That's me, that's my guys. I don't want my guys to have a back operation. Okay. Is my design or process easily duplicated? So it's one of those things like if you're building something, just because you got some free wood here or you've got something unique or special, you want to be able to duplicate it, that way all your equipment is uniform. You also want to be able to show somebody how to do it and they can easily duplicate the process in case you do want to have more equipment one day. All right, how much time do I want to get away with from my wife? Okay, so once again, it goes back to how much time do you want to spend building this? Do you want to go to job sites and get scrap plywood and scrap pine and all this stuff to where you're literally spending entire weekends to build a few boxes when you could have just paid $20 a box and got it done in a few hours? You know what I mean? So it's like, I know people will drive 2 hours to go pick up a swarm that may or may not be there. I mean, you think about it, swarms almost like packaged bees, what's a swarm? What's a package cost? $130 these days? And they'll spend almost a whole Saturday for a maybe on a swarm, and it's like, man, I don't know, like, I'm not going to drive that far. I got kids. I'm busy during the week. I want to spend my weekend with my kids. So it's like, how much time do you want to get away from your life in order to save money building your equipment? Okay. Do I even like building? Do I really want to be a beekeeper? Like, do I like building this stuff? You know what I mean? You got to think about this. Like, do I want to put this stuff together? For me, Like when I die and I go to hell, God is going to make me put frames together for all of eternity. Okay? That is going to be my personal hell because I hate it so stinking much. So if you want to know what the worst thing in the world for me to do is to build frames. So I will gladly buy either one-piece plastic frames or I will buy in simple frames and pay somebody to do it because I am not doing it. All right. Where do I park the car now that the garage is full? I mean, that's something you got to think about. Where are you going to put all your stuff? You know what I mean? Like, how often do you like fighting with your wife? You know? Like, where are you going to put all this stuff when you start building it? And then Google divorce attorney because, you know, every commercial beekeeper has gone through that. So, just joking about it. All right, so cypress. Some people will build their equipment out of cypress. You know, it's less prone to eroding than pine, but I will say a lot of the information that you're going to read online about cypress is old growth cypress. The new stuff like that you're going to buy is not old growth cypress. It is new stands. It's new growth cypress. New stuff is not going to last that long. I saw that new stuff is only going to last about 3 years without any treatments versus, you know, so it's like not much different than pine. It's lightweight, it's easy to cut through nail, it's insect resistant. That's one thing that it does have that pine doesn't, is it has a slight bit of insect resistance. The cons, it is more expensive than pine, it still rots, and it's harder to find. So I do not have any cypress in my operation. I will say I bought some cypress bottom boards when I first got into beekeeping. I painted it, and I got 3 years out of it before it rotted. So it's one of those things. The new cypress is not the same as the old. It's kind of like old redwood used to be awesome, it lasts forever. But you know, they just don't have some of that old growth stuff. Everything's new. So cedar, man, I love cedar, so gorgeous, but it's insect resistant, it's rot resistant, it's easy to cut, nail, screw, etc. It's beautiful, it smells amazing. That box right there is actually from Kansas Bee Company. That's what they sell. So you can actually buy a Mine's in those boxes if you want. And so they're gorgeous. The big problems with cedar is it's more expensive, quite a bit more expensive than pine, and it splinters really easy. So if you hit corners, it's real bad about splitting, and that's the reason I don't have much cedar. I do have some cedar lids that I really like. It's nice and lightweight. You know, a lot of times I'll make my shims out of cedar, different stuff like that on my lids and bottom boards. But that's you know, cedar's one of those things. It's a lot more expensive, so I really don't have that much cedar equipment in my operation. So plywood. So not all plywood is the same. General plywood is CDX. It's easy to cut, nail, screw, paint. It's easy to find. Sometimes you can get it for free. It's fairly cheap. So typically, if you go to the store, most of the plywood that you're going to buy for a decent price is going to be CDX. The problem is it rots, it swells, it falls apart. It's not good for outdoors without extreme protection. It's heavier than pine, and it's very prone to warping. So we're going to get into some wax dipping, and I'll say that I tried to wax dip some CDX in order to get it to basically be able to withstand the elements outside. It totally worked. The problem is that it soaked up about 10 pounds of wax. So I had this lid that just weighs a freaking ton, and then you have more money in the wax that is soaked up than you would have been if you would have bought like a concrete board lid or a signboard lid or something like a better quality lid. And so I don't do that. So OSB plywood is cheap, easy to cut, nail, screw. It's easy to find, free everywhere. The bad thing is, it falls apart. And leave that stuff outside, like the dew will make it fall apart. It's terrible. It's weak, it's brittle, it's really rough. You're gonna splinter yourself up like crazy messing with it. Super prone to warping. It's a terrible choice. I see people make stuff out of this on the Facebook group every year. I just shake my head because I know that they're going to be replacing that stuff immediately. So, subfloor plywood. So it's fairly cheap. It can be moisture resistant. Certain brands, like this is one you got to be very brand specific on. It's easy to find, easy to cut, screw, paint, nail. Cons: only certain brands have glue rated for exterior applications. It's very heavy. It's a lot more expensive than CDX, and it still is prone to warping. So the brand, and I probably could have put it on there, that a lot of beekeepers will make their lids out of is called Advantech. So if you guys are interested in making it out of that, it is called Advantech. It is not the brand that they sell at Home Depot. They do sell it at some Lowe's and some Menards, but Advantech is the only one that has the exterior rating that everybody is looking for. The rest of them are not rated to be outside for long at all. And the problem with those lids is you don't paint them, treat them, glue them, or anything, and they're still like 5 pounds out of the gate. Like they're really heavy. And it's one of those things like if you got 1 or 2 lids, it's not a big deal. If you're loading an entire semi like I am, and every lid weighs an extra 5 pounds, that adds up. That's the way I don't want. I like everything to be fairly lightweight going out of the hive or going on the semi. I want more weight bees and honey. So this is what I use. This is what most commercial beekeepers use. Like this is the stuff. If you guys have a hookup on this, like somebody has concrete form boards, get with me. You're my new best friend. All right. So MDO, HDO, concrete board, form board, sign boards, all kind of the same thing. Small differences. It's fairly easy to find. It's fairly easy to cut, screw, nail, and paint. Almost completely moisture resistant. The least prone to warping of all the other plywood. It's possible to find cheaper sources from large concrete companies. The only problem is it's expensive. It's harder. It's the hardest of the plywood, and it's hardest to find of the plywood. So I think this is the laser. The top button, right? Yeah. Yeah. So MDO right here, you can get this at Menards. And when I would make my lids out of this, I'd still have it, 4 on a stack, and I cut through 4 at a time or 3 at a time. Either 3 or 4 at a time to make all my lids. And so it is harder than plywood, but it's not that hard. You really don't even have to paint it. Like you can just put it outside and it will stay. We get form boards now out of Chicago, which you can buy by the semi-load if you guys are interested. And it's super cheap, and it's like one of those things, if you can find these companies that get rid of their old form boards, that's the way to go. And it's 1/2 inch, and I don't care. It's got nails in it, I don't care, it works. But that right there is what the majority of beekeepers, like commercial beekeeping operations, make their lids out of, and we blow them. They're great, they're lightweight, they bring that thing. Hardwoods, they're pretty, but the cons are everything. Everything about it sucks. Do not make your equipment out of oak. You're just wasting your time and money, unless you just want to sit something in a spot and never do anything with it. It's just, I don't suggest it at all. So, same slide. This is going to be the same thing when it comes to your treatments. Time, money, investment, etc. Keep that in mind. So you got your different wood treatments, okay? So you have your all natural treatments. Those are going to vary. I will admit, I don't have experience or know about all of them because they come up with new stuff every day. You got all your different oil, seals, stains, etc., paint, wax dipping, copper naphthenate, and other all natural products, typically easy to find, cheap, easy to apply. Problem is they don't last long. You must apply them every year to keep them from rotting. So a lot of people, they want to rub it in tongue oil, or they want to rub it in, linseed oil is another one that's real common. All that stuff is very pretty. It just doesn't last very long. It's one of those things it'll work for a season or two, but it's like if you don't want your equipment to rot, you will be applying it a lot more often. So the natural stuff, while it might look good, it might have some other advantages and benefits, a lot of the problem is it's just not going to last. So, and I'm sure that somebody's going to say, well, this lasts this long. Yeah, there's a million things. I'm kind of generalizing. So paint, this is going to be your most common. So it's fairly cheap. It's easy to customize, you're making ink, you're colorful, it's easy to find, it's easy to do. The cons is it doesn't last long, maybe 3 to 8 years, depending on coats and quality. In order for good results, you need to apply every few years if good quality paint isn't cheap. So this is going to be like the majority of beekeepers. This is going to be, they're going to paint their hives, they're going to paint their equipment. That's fine, that's what I did. I do like having different boxes, different colors. I do feel like it helps a little bit with queen mating and stuff like that. And so I do like having painted boxes. I will say, with getting into last a while, I have talked to some commercial guys, and so they will paint multiple, you have multiple coats, but they will also paint inside the boxes basically in the corners, and they swear that they get several more years out of it. Because I'm that guy that, like, once I put it together, I don't want to touch it again. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to bring my stuff in and paint it every 3 years. I'm not that organized. Just not. So anyways, like, I've heard that a lot of guys, like, they will paint those corners on the inside and last longer. And I will say a lot of people, they still stack them like that when they paint them, and then they won't get the tops and the bottoms. That's where your rot's gonna get. So if you're just painting your eyes with no other type of treatment to the wood, make sure that you're painting the tops and the bottoms, even if you don't want to paint the insides. At least paint the tops and the bottoms of your hives in order for it to last longer. So wax dipping, this is my preferred method. All right, yes, that is the Joker, that's me. So the pros are wood can last up to 35 years. I know multiple beekeepers who have wax dip boxes that are 35 years old. And that was the big thing that got me to kind of invest into wax dipping, is that basically it's gonna live longer than I am. If I live more, 35 more years, I'll be shocked. I'm already falling apart. I'm only in my mid-30s. So if I get 35 years out of my equipment, man, maybe I just need to jump in that thing. So some of the pros are it doesn't have a bunch of harsh chemicals. Painting isn't necessary. You can dip used equipment. That was probably one of the biggest things also that got me to invest in it, because at the time I already had a bunch of beekeeping equipment. I wanted it to last because it was a big investment. And so wax dipping, I can wax dip stuff that's already been painted, et cetera. Yes, it's going to burn some of the paint. Yes, it's going to discolor. Yes, it's going to have bubbles. If you look at me, you can tell I don't care about looks. I care about, the ability for it to function. So it's one of those things where, paint will bubble and all this other stuff, but the box will last for a long time, even if it's an older box that's already been painted. So that's one thing I like about wax dipping. And pretty much as soon as you pick it up out of the melter, you can put bees in. It'll cool in a few minutes and it's good to go. Versus some of the other methods, you gotta let them air out with the copper naphthalene. And so that's one thing I really like about it. Even paint, like, I know that they suggest you air it out for like so long before you put bees in it and stuff like that. Wax dipping, like, it dries, it is what it is. It's good to go. Some of the cons are it is dangerous, it's very hot, and it's flammable. Yes, I have been burned by it. Yes, I have had multiple fires by it. And yes, my helper almost killed himself with it. And so it's one of those things where you do have to be very careful with it. I have a very large dipping tank. And it can be expensive, and equipment can be slick when hot. I'm going to go back to the dangerous part. Once it gets really hot outside, sometimes it can leak a little bit, and if you're moving the equipment around, it can be a little slick almost, but it has to be pretty hot in order to do that. So going back to the dangerous side, I'll let you see my tank. So my tank is big enough to put full pallets in. So that is a lot of wax, okay? I can stack my hot bodies basically tall ways, and so I can dip a lot of equipment in that tank. Wax is one of those things where they say like over 400 degrees, it can like spawn like between 400 and 600, depending on different things, that it can spontaneously combust, basically, just ignite. And so you got to really watch that temperature. And my help, one time I left, told them everything. We've been wax dipping all day, figured I could run to the store, get some stuff, run some other errands. I came back and I could see smoke as I come down my street. he had got it over 400 degrees and then threw a bunch of water into it, which basically made it explode and then got into the burner, which then ignited, so my entire yard was inflamed. He's lucky that it didn't explode onto him.
No doubt.
Okay? And so it's one of those things where I'm really bad about like feeding people information through a fire hose. I'm really bad about that. That is a personal character flaw. And I'm sure that when I was explaining all this stuff to my employee, that he just kind of missed some of the things. And yeah, he could have got really hurt by that. So anyways, that was, you gotta be careful with that stuff. But I will say this, it's not like as flammable as some people will make it out to be. If my tank catches fire for whatever reason, which it has, it's kind of like if you've been in a kitchen where the big deep fryers are, it's one of those things you can usually just kind of either splash more wax on it, or most of the time what we do is we just grab the lid on it, and it goes out and go right back to dipping. And so I usually have a bucket of sand too, to where if it's on the ground, I just scoop some on the ground onto it, and it's not a big deal. One big problem was when you get too hot, or if you add water to it, those are kind of the big ones. But this is my setup, and basically I had underneath it, which I didn't take any pictures of those, I really should have. I've got these two burners, they're 210,000 B2U burners. They're designed to make 100 gallons of water boiling in less than 10 minutes. So we hook those up to two 100-pound, we have two of those, we have 420,000 BTU burners. And then two 100-pound tanks for dipping. And it's one of those things, like it'll still take hours to liquefy that wax. And so when we do, dip our equipment, we try to make it like a full day process. That way we can get a lot done. And with that, like I said, with that new tank that I got, man, I got a lot of stuff dipped really fast. Now we got a basket that fits in this perfect. I think I can dip like 28 mediums at a time or something like that. And I did quite a bit of equipment. I think like 3 pallets. I can't remember how many deeps, but we can really split out the equipment out of that. I will say when I first started though, my first wax dipping tank was only 2 foot by 2 foot, and it might have been 30 inches tall or something like that. So I can only basically dip like 3 deeps at a time. So it took me forever when I was dipping stuff. But once again, time, money, blah blah blah. It was one of those things like the wax is your biggest investment. You know what I mean? Because you got to buy that wax in bulk, and in order to get a good price on it, you can get it down for as low as about $1 a pound, but it's usually like a 2,000 pound minimum order, and then shipping and stuff like that, or trucking. I think I bought mine in Oklahoma. So, anyways, the next slide is how to do it. So, so in order to dip a big metal tank that can hold lots of weight, take lots of heat. So I have stainless tanks because I got them on Craigslist, and I was able to make them for fairly cheap. It doesn't have to be stainless. You can just use iron, you can just use sheet metal, but it has to be, in order to you got to put lots of heat in the bottom, so it's got to be pretty thick metal. I wouldn't just use some thin metal. So I've used both the 50% paraffin and 50% micro, and then also the paraffin and pine rosin. Those are 2 different formulas. I will never use pine rosin again. The reason I will never use pine rosin again is it did not mix as well as I wanted it to, and it left a crack over all my hives. And so I really like the micro. I have less like bleeding or leaking on hot days when I use the micro wax. And so I really suggest using 50, and that's microcrystalline is what that stands for, but 50% microcrystalline wax and 50% paraffin wax. You will not get that for less than $1. You're probably going to spend more like $3 a pound for that. Still, once again, buying in bulk. You're going to need high BTU burner, just depending, like my 2-foot tank, I just had one of those burners. You can get those burners off of Amazon for about $70. They're really not that bad, Proper protection wear, like insulated gloves, an apron, eye and face protection. I keep coming in and out or something. It
Yeah,
sounds.
check the connection on the at the bottom where the clip is.
So, proper protection. Insulated gloves are a big one because you're getting them wet. You know what I mean? Like, you want some thick gloves. Leather gloves are not enough. You will roast your hands in leather gloves. Ask me how I know. So, fire protection, lid for the tank. So once again, I have had fires. You will have fires. Everybody that is wax dip has had fires. So just a way to manage it. You know what I mean? So basically, if you want, when you go to wax dip your equipment, what you're going to do is you're going to heat it up between 250 to 300 degrees. Basically, what you're wanting to do and what the wax does is it's kind of like deep frying. So when you deep fry potatoes, you know, you get that wax or get that oil up hot, it pushes all the water and moisture out of those potatoes and it kind of replaces it with oil and makes them crispy and delicious. With wax, it pushes out all the moisture out of your wood and then fills those voids on the inside with wax. So your wood's going to last forever because you have wax on the inside that's not getting exposed to the elements. You're not going to, it cannot get water inside at that point. Okay, it's basically going to push it off at that point. And so that's why, you know, water boils at 212 degrees. You want to get it ample above that, you know, just to ensure that you are boiling the water out of the hive, out of the equipment. So you're going to dip it for, you know, 10 to 30 minutes or until the foam stops. So depending on what you dip in there, and then how much moisture it has in there, how hot you are, etc. But it's one of those things where you dip a lot of equipment in there, it's going to foam for a little bit longer. If you've got really dry equipment, you're dipping a smaller amount, you don't necessarily need to go for that long. I kind of, you know, a lot of my stuff is kind of standardized because a lot of times we'll have employees do it, etc. And so we want to have kind of like a repeatable process. And so we just kind of set ourselves at 15 minutes and we just run everything for 15 minutes, unless it's pallets because then you're going into a full 2x4. But all our other equipment, we have a standard 15 minutes, and you know that's what we did for. All right, so if you choose to paint, you have to do it with an oil-based paint in order for it to adhere, and then you have to do it while it's hot. So basically, if you want to, you know, paint it, you pretty much have to get it on there like super fast while that box is still hot. And it will actually suck in some of that oil-based paint, and it's one of those things where, you know, it's on there at that point. Once it's painted, like it's never coming off, it's never coming out, like it is that color. And if you paint on top of that after it's cool, it's not going to stick. It's going to eventually come off. So I will say this: that once something is wax dipped, you would think it's always going to have like a waxy coating or whatnot, or it's going to be slick, or you're going to know. I could put a wax box right next to two other boxes, and you guys wouldn't even be able to tell which one's wax dipped. So we actually stencil the ones that are wax dipped, so that we know that they have been wax dipped, because that wood absorbs all the wax that's actually on the outside of the box. So it's one of those things, like if you think you're going to get boxes that have like a waxy coating, you're wrong. You're not. You're not even going to know. So one of the other big, preservatives that people use to preserve their hives is copper naphthenate. And really, I was kind of hoping Stuart Dietz was going to come so I could put him on the spot and kind of talk about this stuff, because he is the expert on copper naphthenate, and I am not, because I don't have. This is something that I did not choose, but it's one of those things that's still another good product to use. The pros of copper naphthenate is fairly cheap to start. Your equipment can last 10 to 40 years. It's fairly safe. The bad part is equipment will still need to be painted. It doesn't last as long as wax dipping, and you must air out the equipment months before using. So typically what you'll do is you'll buy, like, this is I think it's Poles.com or whatever, you'll buy this mix, and then you'll mix it like 8 to 1 with either diesel fuel or mineral spirits. And basically once you dip it unassembled, you leave it in there for 24 hours, and you pull it out, and you air it out for, I think they said like 3 months is what Stewart suggests. And so, it's one of those things where I'm pretty bad about planning stuff 3 to 4 months in advance. I'm not gonna lie. Like maybe a month out is usually pretty good, 2, like maybe, but like 3 to 4, not that good. So it's one of those things where, you almost have to dip it in the summer just where you can assemble it and paint it in the wintertime. But in the summertime, like I'm balls to the wall trying to get everything that I need done. Like I'm not thinking about what I need to do for the wintertime, thinking about what I need to do right here and there. And that was one of the big deterrents that I did not use it for. The other reason I chose not to go this route is because you really can't, like if you already have painted equipment or equipment that you already have, like there's really no point in copper dipping, like you've already sealed up your wood, it's not gonna get into it. Versus like, wax dipping, like no, it's gonna find every crack and cranny and force it in. This is not gonna do that. So it's pretty much just for newer equipment. I will say this though, I will probably, like once I get a bigger shop and everything like that, I will probably invest in a tank and some carbonate to get plywood in, and then also pallets in, because like I said, you get a lot of times plywood for free or cheap, or CDX is also, widely available. Treated plywood is so much more, and this is what you're basically, getting is this stuff. Except this is actually better because it's oil-based instead of water-based. This doesn't actually leach out to the hide or anything else like that. So this is a very good product. It's just not as good as wax dipping, because wax dipping is more permanent. This is, like I said, most people are going to get like 10, 15 extra years out of it. But I would love to do this with my pallets and my lids, so that way I can use like regular plywood. So care. Where's it going? There it goes. Don't do this. So it kind of said like care of equipment. I didn't really exactly know what to put in there, so I just said what not to do. Don't treat it like I treat it. Drop it around, beat it up. But with put 4 cold pockets. I feel like most of my equipment that is, now that I've started wax dipping, the majority of my cold equipment is stuff that's been dropped, or broken, or something like, or older equipment I bought from somebody else. Like, I know I've bought out over a dozen operations at this point. So, but since we're talking about equipment, I know you got beekeepers, like, I feel like we're all kind of like our own garage geniuses, our own like backyard scientists, our own, like wood shop engineers. And it's one of those things, like, it seems like it's very common, and we all have like our way of doing things that we like. And it's one of those things where sometimes we will make stuff that's so far out that then we end up regretting it later. And I've got stacks of equipment that I thought I was going to love and it didn't like this or that or whatnot. But like before I was palletized, which I figured most of you guys are not palletized yet, or ever will be or whatnot, I made a combination lid bottom board so I could take it out to yards, just a big old stack of them, and whatever I needed, I had. And I loved it because it lasted forever, and I could use it as a lid or a bottom board. And I'm going to show you guys that right now. This was like one of my best inventions that now I don't even use, and it sits on a pallet. But man, back before I was palletized, this was great. So I will show this to you guys, and you guys can clone it. So ignore this basically, because now the only thing that we use these for is basically when we want to make a split over a parent colony, and then kind of use that heat from the bottom hive, because like I said, it's the top and the bottom. So this is the bottom side. So you still have your shim all the way around, have your entrance and everything. Added this later because, like I said, we started using it for splits, and I didn't want a full open box in order for it. I got my little drain holes in the side so it doesn't, fill up with water. And I have my stand. So these are 2 inches, and that I made out of a 5/4 deck board, and that way I can keep it up out of the mud. And also, like, it's a rim on top of my hive. And so that way, it's like I said, so that's gonna hang off the front and off the back, and if I set it on the ground, it's gonna keep my hive out of the mud. And then once again, I have my 3/8 rim on the top, so that I have, room for my patty or my treatment or whatever on the inside. So like I said, this is just 2-inch 5/4 deck board, 3/8 shim, and then 3/4 inch MDO board from Menards right there. So basically, I don't even know what MDO costs a sheet now, because everything is through the roof. But when I was making these, the MDO was about $60 a sheet, back when plywood was $30 a sheet. Like I said, these I had basically $7-8 in a piece, and they would last forever. Like everything's treated, that's sign board. I mean, it ain't going nowhere. That thing will outlast me. And so that's like one of the designs on equipment that I made that I really liked. Talk about bringing one, but just did. These are the lids that I run now, and it's very similar to that. And so just between a 3/8 and 1/2 inch shim on the top, 2-inch 5/4 deck board on the bottom, and then just flat concrete board or MDO plywood. So that plywood's gonna pretty much last forever. And so a lot of people will put a cleat on the tops of their hives. And one reason they put that cleat on the top of their hive is so when they stack them on, pallets, that pallet won't slide off as the other hive helps hold it, okay? And that is a nice advantage of having that cleat on there. I like having this because what I can do is when I have a yard and I have a hive that, let's say, went queens, or they swarmed out, now they're in the process of making a queen. I've got over 600 colonies. I'm not going to write notes on my hives. I'm not going to remember which one did what. I'm not going to remember anything. There's just too many different variables. We try to keep all our yards even, consistent, etc. And so when I flip a hive lid upside down, it doesn't leave like gaps for other bees to get in. It's just a flat lid, and it's a visual indicator for me that something was up with that hive. Because I usually have like a 1 or 2 week cycle of going back to that yard, and then I can go back 2 weeks, check it, or hey, which hive was it this morning? Which hive needed a new box? Which hive needed this or that? And it's like that was the oddball of the bunch, because typically our yards are 48. They're all with the same queens at the same time, with the same resources, etc. And so when I have something like this upside down, just like it is right now, I know that's an oddball. I need to do something with this next time I come out. So that's my lid design. So I want to warn you guys: beekeeping is equipment, or beekeeping is. I'm thinking about equipment. It is addictive. All right. So if you guys are here this late in the season and you came to a class on equipment, you probably already know. You know what I mean? But I started this just like you guys did. Like I didn't inherit some operation from my dad or grandpa, or had like an uncle that did this or anything like that. Like I started this in my backyard with one hive, and now this is where I'm at. So it is. It's addictive, it's contagious, stay away. You'll be on that for your second back surgery next time. These are my 2 boys, 2 oldest. This was several years ago, and they're a little bit bigger now. In fact, my oldest just now learning to cook. He gave me breakfast in bed this morning. Can you believe that? I doubt it'll last. That's it. So questions?
From your wax dipping experience, do you feel like when the bees glue boxes up, does that help at all with that, or is it they're still stuck together as they were before?
When you say does it help with what, do you mean like, are you trying to say does it help them come apart easier?
Yeah, is it easier to pry the box?
Propolis is still a pain in my butt, just like it is yours. I will say wax dipping does help remove propolis. So like when I go to dip everything, like I don't really, like I'll scrape off the cobwebs and everything. I used to scrape off the propolis. Now, like after you dip it, the propolis is so burnt, like it just kind of flakes off your hive. And so I've heard of some people using it to sanitize beekeeping equipment. And so I don't know about all the data and the facts, but like I think Stewart said one time like there's a good chance that it'll even kill like American Falconry spores because of the high temperatures that it's exposed to for so long. So it's one of those things like I know a lot of people are paranoid about by that when they're buying like older equipment. And so it's one of those things like if that's like an issue, that might be something to look into for that. I'm not very familiar.
So then do you feel like you're wax dipping like once a year or just like whenever you have?
So I have heard it is best to wax dip twice and wax dip one time and then wax dip if you're not painting. If you're not, I'll clarify, if you're not painting. Wax dip and then after 2 years wax dip again and that thing will just last 100 years. I wax dip one time and it's going out, you know what I mean? And so it's one of those things where I have yet to throw out any of the boxes that I wax dipped, and I've got some boxes that I've painted 30 colors, like when I first got in, and it's one of those things where I wax dipped them, and man, they're still like a brand new box. Versus, I've got some boxes that I bought from other people, like they're 3 years old and they're like already starting to rot out, because they don't paint them very good out of the factory. Like Van Langer Dave and just spray them and send them out, But so it's one of those things like, no, I'm noticing like a huge difference on that. And I will say, I probably should point this out, I did tell you this, but all these boxes in that first slide, so all those boxes right there were actually copper napkin and dipped. And every single one of them had a rotten corner. And they were copper dipped, brand new, okay? I bought these from my buddy Shannon Charles. He's a big commercial beekeeper out of the Dakota in Texas. I bought them for $2 a piece because, like I said, everyone has like a rotten, see that little rotten section right there, right there, right there. Just every one of them has a rotten corner somewhere. And they were all copper dipped. I know Stewart has some that he brags about that are 35 years old. But I will say, like, Stewart's very good at taking care of his equipment. He's very meticulous. He puts on, a million coats of the best quality paint ever. He knows how to find the best quality paint. If you're just wanting to go get paint from Home Depot and throw a few coats on it and throw it out to your operation and never mess with it again, you're probably not going to get no 30 years out of a copper dip. So you're going to be like this, like Shannon Charles, where you might get 10 years, like I think he said is, but the stuff that he's doing now, he said he's dipping it in copper naphthenate, and then he's putting 3 coats of paint on it and painting the inside corners. And so he's really putting a lot into it versus me as waxed it, so I don't paint them, just throw them in the wax dipper, take them out, throw them in the operation. But he's kind of got, the years of, like I said, he said they're probably between 10 to 20 years old. So, and that answer the question?
Yeah. How long ago did you start wax dipping?
About 7.
Wow.
I started pretty early on, 6 or 7. Because I started doing removal and everything on the 3rd year, I think. So,
Where do you get your wax in your microbit?
I couldn't even tell you it's been so long. That's something you have to, get with me. I'd have to get into my emails and search for when I bought it. I'm pretty sure the company that I got them from was in Oklahoma called Premier Wax, but I had to buy them through another company that sold it, if that makes sense. And so I don't remember what the name of that company was. And the rosin, like I said, I would not go that route. So, and the company that I bought the paraffin from, they didn't have micro. So that's one reason I did the route that I am. I'll never go back. Once this is out, once I run out, I'm not going back to the rosin. It'll be 100%, micro and paraffin. So, and it's one of those things too, like once I order more, or whatever. If you guys ever want to do like a big bulk buy or somebody want to get in on it or something like that, I'm totally down because it takes me years. Dude, I did over 1,000 boxes and haven't gone through a pallet. like, it really don't cost, like, once you pay for the investment of wax tipping, like, it's not that expensive, but it is that original investment. You gotta buy enough wax to fill a big tank. You know, if you wanna do it, but you gotta buy enough wax to, get a good price. You know, otherwise you're just doing like, I don't know, $5 a pound. I really have no idea what's smart markets. That's something you probably have to get with me, I'd have to look up. It's definitely all over the place.
Do you ever use other than copper naphthalate as a preservative?
So I don't use carbon naphthalene, I waxed it. And so, no, I just waxed it. I know that, so as far as other stuff, and I put that on there, I've heard of a lot of other guys doing, I've heard everything. I've heard used motor oil and diesel fuel and roofing tar all mixed together and put their stuff in it, soak it, and then let it air out, you know? And they would use that for their bottom boards and their pallets to keep them from rotting, you know what I mean? And then they would do something different for the boxes or whatnot. I've heard of, let's see, what's some other ones that I've heard of? But, I mean, you name it, I've heard of people doing it. It's like, I mean, I'm sure some of them work and some of them help, but I just know that I just haven't, what product are you thinking of?
I've heard of, a lot like you, lots of
Yeah.
everybody, but I've most recently heard of pentachlorophenol,
I have no idea.
using it on pallets to prevent the bottom rot.
Yeah. No, I don't know, and I'll be honest, on my pallet, like runners, I'm trying to get away from dipping pallets because it's so expensive. That plywood just soaks up wax so bad that it makes it not beneficial to dip pallets.
That's why they've gone to so many other.
And exactly. And so it's one of those things where I'm thinking about doing something different on that. That's one reason I'm probably gonna get a tank so that I can, of copper naphthalate so that I can dip my pallets and plywood in that. But I don't have that yet. I haven't experience on how much plywood soaks up on that, or if it's even worth it on that. But, no, they have all kinds of stuff out there, but, no, I don't know. I know a lot of guys that used to swear by that, you know, like I said, you get roofing tar and then they cut it with diesel fuel, which, you know, breaks it down, and then, you know, that evaporates and leaves that into the wood or whatnot, but I've never done that. I've just kind of heard guys talk about it. So. But I know Paul Landsberg, like a lot of his old bottom boards and lids were basically that. They weren't painted, they were all black, and it was basically like a combination of motor oil, roofing tar, and diesel fuel, you know, but I just, for one, I'm not a chemical-free beekeeper. I mean, we treat our bees, okay? I'll say that right off the bat. I still get a little bit nervous about dipping all my stuff in like roofing tar, diesel fuel, and putting my bees in it. You know what I mean? I'm still a little nervous on that stuff. You know, bees are part of the investment, and still a little bit nervous on that. But like for pallets, I could definitely see, you know, having your runners and different stuff like that in ground contact where, you know, I don't know what I did.
Pallets are what they're using.
Yeah. So, I don't know. That's those things, man, those runners that stick in the mud like year round, they're so bad about rotting out, and you got termites and ants and everything else like that. And I will say this, your carpenter ants don't give a crap about your wax tipping. They will still eat in your hive bodies, your pallets, everything. They do not care. And I think the copper naphthalate though, it does help with that. Wax tipping, no, those carpenter ants, they don't care. They'll just eat right through them. But, no, I have not heard about that specific product.
I noticed that you had hive boxes that had tin lids, or steel lids, coating on the outside lid. You ever use plastic?
I don't really use anything with metal anymore on my lids. I think I have some probably still. I don't use them anymore. You say plastic lid?
It's a plastic material that is thin enough that it will form over the lid. You just take a heat gun and run around it, and it melts right down.
No, I haven't
And
heard
then
that.
they just staple in
No.
corners.
You know, it's one of those things. So, and I totally forgot to do a slide on plastic. So here's the biggest, so I like plastic in a lot of different beekeeping equipment. You know, like frames, I love my one-piece of plastic frames, I really do. A lot of people hate them and they say that they have this problem and that problem. Oh, they don't draw them out. Oh, they don't do this, they don't do that. I love plastic frames. From what I've heard, the plastic hive bodies, they have a real bad problem of sliding around. They don't like stick together. Like I know a lot of guys, and they'll get brave and they'll throw pallets of these on the truck and not strap them down. And it's like one of those things where, I'm not that guy, but they will. But they say with the plastic, you gotta get that hive strap down so tight because it will just shift around so bad. And that's one problem they have with plastic. So I wonder with having a lid, with having another pallet on top of it, that would be my problem in my operation. If you didn't have pallet, you know, if you weren't palletized and kind of moving, and it'd probably be great. The only thing is I know a lot of plastics, like UV breaks it down real bad.
This isn't,
But
this is UV tolerant.
real good. Yeah, I don't have any experience in it, but man, I will say they've come a long way with plastics, and a lot of the products that they're making with plastic now, I mean, it's far superior than wood, you know. So I'll even touch on that on the frames. A lot of people, you guys don't like the one-piece frames that are plastic. Here's one thing I love about this, okay? So we run those almost exclusively on our honey supers because you gotta think, we get like, okay, so honey super medium, it's 6 and 5/8. Your frame's gonna be, say, 5 and 5/8, right? Well now, you got an inch of wood basically broke down on the top, so you're like 4 and 5/8. I can't remember exactly how big your foundation is, but you just get it smaller and smaller, right? When you run plastic frames, you've got this much plastic on top and this much plastic on the bottom, so you get more honey out of a one-piece plastic frame than you ever will get on a wood frame. And so for me, it has a very big efficiency thing, because I don't want to run deep, so I don't want them that heavy, but I do hate wasting a lot of space in all those different wood frames. And you will get more get more bees out of a frame of brood, you'll get more honey out of a frame of honey. So I love plastic frames. So as far as like plastic frames go, man, they're great. Only my biggest problem with them is they're real bad about gluing the boxes together on
Yes.
plastic frames.
Yes.
Besides that, man, I love them. But as far as the lids go, I've really got no experience as far as that goes.
How much, what's your success rate in buying used equipment like that?
Man, it's a coin toss. So, I've bought out so many operations that, I mean, I've lost count at this point. The thing is, I've learned, go look at it. I've had terrible luck if I don't go look at it. Because if I take their word, some man's trash is another man's treasure. It's always the dude selling its treasure and everybody else's trash. You know what I mean? So when it comes to buying stuff out, I've always had better luck when I go find it. And when they tell me it's trash, it's usually actually pretty good. When they say, oh man, these frames are great. And you get out there and the frames are older than you, work like this, you know what I mean? It's like, no, I don't want 40-year-old frames, you know what I mean? Like I gotta run these things through a mechanical uncapper. They gotta be straight and square. And so, you know, I will buy used equipment any chance I get, honestly, if I get a chance to look at it. I've been burned so many times by sight unseen, you know, that I don't typically buy it unless I can see it. I will say this, I'm not afraid of American Falconry because I know what it looks like. I can go to an operation and look through their comb and I can see if I find it. If I find it, I'm out. And I have backed out because of that. And so it's one of those things where if you're gonna buy used equipment, this goes for anybody, know what you're looking at. Whether it's quality equipment or American Falconry spores. It's one of those things where I tell everybody, just look in your frames. If it looks like any of those frames has a little chocolate at the bottom of it, run. You know, that's kind of the easiest way to identify it. But it's one of those things with used equipment. I dip so much, and I'll throw out, most of the time the frames are trash, and the high bodies are halfway decent, you know, especially after I dip them, that I'll buy used equipment all day long. But like I said, you gotta be able to see it first, so I bought a lot of used stuff. I would would say 90% probably, maybe more than that, probably 90% or more, 95% of my operation I bought out from other people. We bought out a big operation where I got over 900 high buys in, and that really helped me. I got a steal on that one, so that was good. It was all, that was crazy because it was all dated boxes. They were only 2 years old, and I put them out in the field that year, and I was bringing in honey supers from that, like I said, 2 years, I put them out for a year, they were coming in rotten because they weren't waxed in. So 3 years after a dated paint, and they were already starting to rot. That's how bad, wood is. So like you guys are, how many new beekeepers you got? Like 2 years or less? Got 1? 2? Okay. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you think if you're just gonna throw paint on, and you're good for like 5 or 10 years, you're mistaken. You know what I mean? That's why we're having a class like this, But no, I've had pretty good luck buying new stuff.
Do you ever spray them?
I paint.
Mhm.
I got a sprayer. That when I wax dip and I spray, or when I wax dip and I paint, I want to paint, I bought a sprayer just for that. So, and that's great too. Like, like we use oil-based paint. You have to if you wax dip, and it works great. And I know a lot of people that just spray, period, like they'll crisscross their hives, and then just spray them, big old stack of them and everything else like that. That way they can get to the majority of the tops and the corners and everything else like that. Let it dry, and then they'll flip them, and then do the other side. That way they can get inside the handles, all the tops, corners, and then they get multiple coats on. I think the big thing is just getting multiple coats, and you get a lot more years. But I know if you buy a bunch of boxes from Dayton or Man Lane, look, it's only going to have like 1 coat of paint. It's so thin you see knots through it. That's kind of the problem.
What are you using for trailers?
My name's Matt Winstead. I have a trailer addiction. I have a truck and trailer addiction. I'll say truck and trailer. I think I'm up to how many trucks? I got like 8 trucks, 6 trailers, I think, something like that. What kind of trailer are you asking about?
Are you using a drop bottom or?
So I have a 16-foot tilt bed that I use for Bobcat trucks, anything kind of bigger to haul. I have a Bobcat trailer it is built for my Bobcat. Like I move the axles around. Basically my Bobcat trailer completely customized it from the axles to the connections to the ramps to the wiring to I can move it around with my Bob. Like it doesn't even have it does have a jack, but I mean it is made for beekeepers. My 5th wheel hangs out the back this far. Like it is perfectly built for my trailer. My forks hang off the front this big. So that's my favorite trailer. I have a 20-foot deck over. I've got little tiny utility trailers. I've got that's about it. But yeah, I got a 550. I mean, most of the time it's my Bobcat with my 550, so I can put all the weight in the bed with 550. So I just bought a 7500, a C7500 GMC top kick, and it's one of those things where it's got a 16-foot flat deck on it, and I was hoping to use that for moving bees, and it's not exactly running the best. One of those bought it from an auction site on the scene, and they only do a function test on it. Drive forward, drive reverse, stops, it's good. And I get there and it won't go over 15 miles an hour, and it's like running like so, but most of the time when we haul anything from bees to honey to whatever, I either have the 550 with a little Bobcat trailer or my 20-foot deck over, at 3/4 ton or something like that. So that's my typical.
Question for you. I noticed a couple years ago you put that 5th wheel on your Bobcat. What's the purpose of that?
So that 5th wheel does a lot. Smaller, lightweight Bobcats, like if you,
You did.
Did I have a picture of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
want to show. Let's find that picture that I can show. Which one am I pointing at? Probably the left. I'm retarded when I point at the screen.
There it is.
Okay. So I want you guys to notice something. See how those wheels are damn near touching? The lightweight machines have a very short wheelbase and a lot of weight in the back. And so what happens in a very short wheelbase, it wants to fling around equipment like just, it's really jumpy and bouncy, right? So that fifth wheel basically makes your wheelbase like 2 foot or whatever that is, this long, which is probably closer to like 7 feet, all right? And so you could go over bumps and everything else like that, and it helps tremendously. The other thing is that's a crazy wheel. I mean, it spins around in all directions. I don't keep 700 hives in my house. I keep 700 hives in, like, I think I've got 16 bee yards this year. And so farmers do not want you tearing up their fields, people don't want you tearing up their yard, etc. And so with having that fifth wheel, I can load and unload bees, equipment, honey, etc. And dude, I'll tear up a blade of grass on it. And so you don't tear up hardly anything. The other thing that does is that adds weight to the back end, and so that you can actually lift more. And then I also have a mast installed. I can't even put a bucket on mine. Mine won't even take a bucket. Mine is 100% a beekeeping setup. It is built by Tropic Trailers, 100% beekeeping. It stops for everything else. But that S130 is one of the smaller machines. It only weighs about 5,000 pounds the way that it's set up, and I can pick up 3,000-pound totes of syrup. Okay? You can only do this because of that fifth wheel and that mast, which are unique to that machine. Okay? And so I can spin on a dime, I can load and unload a semi. How long did we take? How long did it take to load it? It was 30 minutes. Yeah. To load and unload all these hives right here, it took, it was less than 45 minutes. Okay? I loaded up, this is 800 singles. I unloaded 800 singles in less than 45 minutes with that machine. Okay? So it's one of those things, it makes you extremely fast and extremely efficient because you're not doing this with your forks all the time. You know, you can just go up and down real fast. You can turn on a dime. It smooths out the ride. Dude, I will not load and unload with a regular Bobcat. I mean, if that machine broke, I would buy another. I don't know if I'd buy that exact one, but I would buy a beekeeping rig. I would not just use a regular Bobcat. It's one of those things where this is my career, you know, if I just wanted to move here and there, you know, regular Bobcat with force would be great. But if you plan on taking this thing to multiple states, you want the lightest Bobcat you can find. They can still pick up a tote of syrup, and that's why I have that. I got that at Corpus Christi, got a heck of a deal on it. I know if any of you guys know anything about Bobcats, you know that once they get around 3,000 hours, they're pretty much toast, you know? I got 6,200 hours on it. I got 6,000 hours on that machine. It runs awesome. Because when you have a beekeeping rig, you never like bog it down. It's one of those things like you're not as hard on it, you know? Even though you lift a lot of weight, you don't actually bog the engine, you know, it just wants to tip, so you never get to pick it up. And so beekeeping rigs like that, they will just last forever. So I love that machine. I would buy that thing 3 times over. It's great. And I just bought a different kind of, I don't know if anybody knows what a swinger is. You know what a swinger is? Your honeybee? I just bought a swinger, which is similar to a honeybee, and it's got a bad motor, so we're trying to find a motor for it right now. So I'm excited to have that too, because that has different advantages also. One of the problems I don't like about this is getting in and out of it, and with my back, it's becoming more problematic. And so I want to have that other one, but it doesn't turn on a dime like a Bobcat would with those things. Like I said, it's great, but it's just harder to get in and out of. So, does that make sense? Any more questions?
What are you using for net over your trailer?
For what?
For netting over your trailer?
So, I will admit, like, so when I, you know, It would be like this trailer, is that what you're talking about? So I hire actual bee haulers, and I pay a premium for that. And so they have their own, you know, tarps, nets, boards, straps, and everything else like that. When I haul bees, 99.9% of the time, I don't use nets, I just move locally. If I have to bring something up from Texas or take to and from Texas, I've got like just a slew of like, 20-foot, tarp nets that I bought from Menards online or whatnot, just kind of make those work. But I know that there's a company called, what's the name of it? You can buy custom bee nets online, TSR. You can have them made specifically for bees, specifically for your rig, exact dimensions that you tell them and everything. I'm probably gonna get one of those made this winter because, we move up, we sell about 1,000 nukes a year and we move those ourselves. And so I would like to have a custom made net just for that because we move so many, it just be so convenient. And so we're probably gonna contact TRS and have them make one for my 20-footer, my 20-foot trailer, because we move the majority of those nukes on that 20-foot deck over. So that's what I use for those. So,
Thank you very much, very informative.
I think that.